Okay, the topic of this video is about the age in which you start drawing. Is it an advantage to start drawing when you're young? Is it not much of an advantage? What's my opinion on that? This was prompted by a question from Pika PT, who I've met in real life. Nice guy, very skilled animator actually, this guy. And it's also one that's echoed by a lot of people. So he's not the only one to have asked it, which is why I decided this was a good topic to talk about, because I think a lot of people want to know more about this. So anyway, Pika PT writes, Howard, this has been a question I've been asking myself for years. I started drawing later than most people. I picked up the pencil at age 19 with no prior drawing or doodling experience and set out to learn how to draw. I'm not the best artist and I don't know if I will ever achieve the level of art that I really want to achieve. It was really discouraging to read every single interview of an artist I looked up to, and I always saw the words, "I've been drawing since as long as I can remember." What about us that started later in life? What about the older generation that picked up the pencil? Can they get to a professional level of illustration and drawing, or will they always be subpar? Like a foreign person will always have an accent in their home country if they move later in life. Good question, PT. That's a really interesting analogy you brought up there. The comparison to a foreign speaker always having their accent for many years. I'm going to start with just my hot take reaction, and then I'll get into more of a deep dive on the subject. So my first hot take of this is like, so what if some famous artists drew pictures as kids? Like, lots of kids draw. They trace over Dragon Ball Z characters. Big deal. Like, anyone can trace a Dragon Ball Z character. It's not giving them any meaningful edge until they gain serious mileage in drawing and learning the fundamentals, like either through a book, through an instructor, or by direct experience making something significant and sort of being aware of what they're doing, developing that self-awareness. But a lot of those early years in drawing, I mean, it's slow progress and it's more akin to like wandering around, not really knowing what you're doing. I don't think it gives many people an edge, really. There are these sayings like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but from my experience, that's because these old dogs might not be willing to learn new tricks. Like, they don't really want to even try. And when they do try, they're great at it. Progress a 4-year-old makes in 5 years is kind of similar to the same progress that an adult can make in 6 months to a year. And that's just my hunch in most cases. And of course, there are exceptions to all of these. I'm generalizing a lot here. That was my hot take, but there's a variety of factors at play here. So this is a good opportunity to compare age groups when it comes to learning drawing skills and making art in general. So let's get into it. Environment is a factor. For sure, environment is a factor. Young children go to play school where they're encouraged to draw. Now, even if they have this scribbly mess of a drawing, their mom or dad is still going to be like, "Oh, that's beautiful, honey," and they'll stick it up on the fridge with magnets. So it doesn't stay that way, but in the beginning, it's very nurturing environment for learning to draw. It's very encouraging, and the standards that children are held to is unbelievably low. Like, if they're able to draw a hand or a face that has even the slightest resemblance to the real thing, they're the talk of the town. They're held to a completely different standard than adults learning it. And, I think that's an environmental factor. If an adult made that same drawing, they'd be laughed at. Other practical environment factors. Kids don't have the full-time jobs which restrict their time in making drawings, so they have a lot of spare time on their hands. Some parents are they put their child through all kinds of extracurricular activities, but kids tend to have quite a lot of spare time. By contrast, an adult who might be transitioning to learning to draw can be met with a lot of resistance, are often seen by society as the breadwinners and are discouraged from doing anything that's not providing for the people around them, providing for their family. Even though I might add, art and animation and creative fields can be a great way of providing, not just for one's family and for oneself, but for the community at large. And yeah, adults in general have major responsibilities which tend to come at the top of their to-do list. They'll always beat something that's just recreational on their to-do list. So that's just a practical restriction you might find as an adult learning to draw or transitioning professionally. There are some major hurdles there. Nonetheless, adults do have free time. We can see that clearly in statistics. If you look at the amount of Netflix hours watched by age group, or the amount of YouTube hours watched by age group, you can see statistically that adults do have free time to spend, and they waste plenty of it. All in all, the environmental factors all seem to come down to the amount of time people can dedicate to learning and making art, the amount of encouragement they receive, and the level of stress they're under. I think that's another one that I'm not really going to go into here, but the level of stress does probably play a part in that, and that can be seen as an environmental factor. Physical development is another factor. Some observations I've made here: children generally haven't been trained in any drawing or painting fundamentals, and it stays that way for a long time until they go to a specialist class. And nor would they find the drawing or painting fundamentals easy to grasp. Adults, on the other hand, have experience in learning difficult, complex concepts. I mean, if you imagine like an adult with, say, an engineering degree, to them, the drawing and painting concepts are not going to be that challenging by comparison of what they've already learned, things they've already gone to school to learn. They won't find that intellectually like a massive hurdle to cross. As well as that, adults have a more developed visual library because they've spent longer on planet Earth. Adults have spent many more years just taking in their surroundings. Adults can see these everyday things with greater nuance, detail, and understanding. They have a much greater visual library because of this. And I also want to say that I think there's a belief out there that the human mind degrades over time, and it reaches its peak at maybe 20 years old. Yeah, I think that idea is utterly ludicrous. There is nothing that should be mentally blocking someone who's older. If your brain is working properly and you are able to develop new habits, which is got to be 99.9% of the population between 0 and 70 years old can develop new habits, can form new things, and can learn. So you're at no physical disadvantage if you're 50 years old, a healthy 60 or 70 year old. What we have here is with drawing and painting, the art skills and animation, if you're an animator, they're not physically demanding skills. You don't need an athletic body to do it. If you're a gymnast, then there is a real shelf life on a gymnast. This isn't even a sport we're talking about. This is just using your hand, and thinking. So you're at no disadvantage as an older person. Here I just want to take a little tangent because I find this really interesting. This is the artist personalities as they relate to age. So I just find this really interesting and wanted to explore this a little bit. An artist's personality is reflected in the art they produce, and part of that personality is tied to what stage of life they're in. So an older artist brings a wealth of experience with them, and that experience is often reflected in their work and their subject matter that they choose to create. They also tend to be a lot more grounded and calm in their approach and attitudes, and sometimes that is good for art, and sometimes that makes their artwork dull and boring. but it can also be good for, you know, creating subtle art that's understood. That's a generalization, of course, but it's something I've noticed. Young people, by contrast, are unformed and energetic. They're more able to think outside the box because they haven't spent as much time being indoctrinated into whatever system of group thinking there is around them. That's a potential advantage, but young people, especially teenagers, can have serious hormone imbalances swinging all over the place, which causes them to like certain things and to do and make certain things which later on in life they will realize is, well, a bit embarrassing. And then there's the really young children who create art. Try getting a young child to sit still for 15 minutes. Young children can come out with the most amazing things, the kind of free-flowing imagination which is just startling to witness. It is charming, but most of the time it's just kind of cute and naive, and it's not necessarily profound, and it's not accompanied with any practical tools to actually fulfill this imagination. So there's this kind of naive charm to a child's drawings and art, but they don't have the necessary tools to actually fulfill the potential within those ideas that they have. So there are lots of factors here, but I guess it's a mixed bag, and you get different things at different stages of an artist's life journey, you know, and it's likely that an artist will change their attitude towards what they create as they go through life. Everything else I've talked about, you can now kind of throw out the window because it makes no difference compared to this one factor, that factor being your character. The largest unifying personality trait that pro animators have is that they are completely nutty, nerdy, geeky addicts about animation. They have this undying fascination with the process. If you can maintain this fascination, you have as much chance as anyone to become a master. I've met fully grown adults who are true masters of themselves, and when they say they're going to do something, they do it. They bring that intense focus with them. They turn up to art class with a folder full of new drawings. They bring those drawings to the teacher, and they are eager to get information that will help them to improve. And when they get that information, they open up their notebook and they take notes. And then they go home that night and they go through their notes to make changes on their art. An artist who does that over any extended period of time is bound to make great progress. And many children that I've met, by contrast, do not have that kind of strength of character. They're far less likely to stay by choice through any kind of hard work unless they are forced to. They can sometimes be forced by their parents, so when they're forced by their parents to do something that they don't actually want to do, they drag their feet. And you can see this in things like piano classes. A lot of children are forced to take piano classes by their parents, and their progress is very slow because they don't really want to be there. They want to be out with their friends, having fun. It all hinges upon that, upon the attitude. Are you there because you want to be there, or are you there because your parents have paid for those lessons? This experience has come through being in art school, and there being, a handful of senior students who were maybe twice the age of the other classmates and myself. And I just noticed their work ethic, and they worked really hard, and they made progress, and they made consistent progress. It was like they would turn up and just be learning something new each week and just putting in those dedicated hours, and they could do that consistently, and it was something in their character. They had strength of character to do that, and they were always there because they wanted to be there. Like, their parents weren't paying for them to be in those art classes, they were paying, and they had saved up by working, so they made sure to make use of that time. That made quite an impression on me to see that by these senior students. Here's my conclusion. You know what? It hardly makes any difference what age you started at. It doesn't affect your prospects for long-term growth and success. The artist's personality is the biggest factor which will determine this. It requires strength of character to know that you have 10,000 more frames to draw ahead of you, and to keep going and to just draw the next frame and to not think about the other ones, to not quit. Like, I'm not even going to look at how many frames I've got to go. I'm just going to turn up each day because this is my job. This is what I do. This is the decision I've made for myself, and I'm going to see it through, and I'm going to create the next drawing. Then after that drawing, I'll create the next drawing. That requires strength of character. You can build it though. The way you build that strength of character is in the choices you make. You make choices. Especially practice making choices that you want to do, not your parents, not your girlfriend or boyfriend, not your teacher, but start making choices for yourself and have autonomy over the choices. That builds this strength of character over time. Once you have it, there is nothing you can't do. There is no barrier you can't break. There's no distance you can't travel. And if you started drawing from a young age, good for you. It's great that you did, and it's a level playing field now, and you have just as much chance as the rest of us. And that's it. That's all I have to say on the matter. This is a really interesting topic though. They're all just ideas though. It's from first-hand experience. It's from just observations that I've made about people. Above all, just don't overcomplicate it. I mean, I've probably overcomplicated it just in this video. It's not that complex. If you want to do it, go and do it. End of story. Goodbye.